The galactic raiding vessel Night Shadow drifted silently through the void, its dark hull absorbing light rather than reflecting it. At the helm, Captain Tahoe watched the main view screen with narrow eyes. His lean face, marked with a thin scar that ran from temple to jaw, remained expressionless as he observed their target. A human transport vessel listing to one side, emergency lights blinking weakly. Life support systems are failing on the target, reported Minsu from the sensor station. I'm reading minimal life signs. 1, maybe 2 survivors at most. Tahoe nodded. This was routine for the crew of the Night Shadow. Find damaged ships, board them, take what was valuable, and leave before authorities arrived. The outer rim was vast and patrols were sparse. By the time anyone responded to distress calls, the Night Shadow would be long gone. Weapons? Tahoe asked. None active, replied Jai-yun, his weapons officer. Her fingers danced across her console. Their defense systems are completely offline. Perfect. Tahoe leaned back in his captain's chair. Bring us alongside. Boarding party, prepare to deploy. Lieutenant Du-yun stood from his station, straightening his dark armor. 6 crew members rose to join him, checking their weapons with practiced efficiency. None spoke. They had done this many times before. Remember, said Tahoe, the scans show valuable tech in the cargo hold. Get in, secure it, and get out. 20 minutes maximum. Du-yun nodded once. Understood, Captain. The Night Shadow's docking tube extended, connecting with the damaged human vessel with a soft metallic clank. Du-yun led his team through, weapons ready. The boarding party moved through darkened corridors, stepping over damaged equipment. Emergency lights cast everything in a red glow, making shadows dance eerily on the walls. Life support is almost gone, said Yi-jun, checking his scanner. Oxygen levels dropping. Then we move quickly, Du-yun replied. They found 2 crew members, both dead. At their stations, Du-yun ordered his team to continue toward the cargo hold. According to their scans, that's where the valuable technology would be. The cargo hold doors were sealed, but Yi-jun made quick work of the lock. The doors slid open with a hiss, and the boarding party stepped inside, weapons raised. Instead of crates of technology or valuable resources, they found a mostly empty space. Shipping containers had broken free during whatever incident had damaged the ship. They lay scattered and broken across the floor. But in the center of the room, one object remained secure. A single stasis pod, its systems still operating on emergency power. Du-yun approached cautiously, wiping frost from the clear top panel. His eyes widened. Captain, he said into his communicator, we have a situation. Tahoe's voice crackled back. What is it? What did you find? There's no cargo, no valuable tech. Du-yun's voice faltered. Just a human child. In stasis. Silence filled the communication channel. Du-yun looked down at the small figure in the pod. A human child, perhaps 5 years old, lay peacefully within, unaware of the ship's damage or the pirates now standing over her. Her small chest rose and fell slowly in the artificial sleep of the stasis field. A child. Tahoe finally responded. Are you certain there's nothing else? Positive, Captain. The other containers are damaged or empty. This stasis pod is all that remains intact. Back on the bridge of the Night Shadow, Tahoe frowned. This was an unexpected complication. Children were not part of their usual operations. Check the pod systems, he ordered. How stable is it? Du-yun gestured to Yi-jun, who examined the stasis pod's control panel. Not good, Captain, Yi-jun reported. The pod's running on emergency power. Maybe a few hours left before systems fail completely. Any identification? Why is there a child alone on this transport? Yi-jun tapped at the pod's interface. There's data here. The child's name is Emma. The transport was bound for Colony Station Harmony. Looks like she's an orphan being sent for placement with a new family. Du-yun looked around the empty cargo hold. There must have been other pods, other children or caretakers. They might have been in the section that was destroyed. The bridge of the night shadow fell silent as the crew contemplated their next move. Pirates had certain unspoken rules. Taking cargo was one thing. Dealing with children was entirely another. "Captain," said Sunbai, the ship's doctor, who had been listening to the exchange, "if the stasis pod fails, the child will die." Tahoe stared at the view screen, at the damaged human vessel slowly dying in space. He had been a pirate for 15 years. He had taken cargo from countless ships, fought when necessary, run when outgunned, but he had never abandoned a child to die. "Bring the pod aboard," he said finally. "We'll drop the child at the nearest neutral station." "Captain," Du Yun sounded surprised. "You heard me. Secure the pod and bring it to the medical bay. Dr. Sunbai will monitor the child's condition." Tahoe's voice hardened. "And let's be clear, this is temporary. We are not getting involved beyond ensuring the child's survival." Du Yun and his team carefully disconnected the stasis pod from its failing power source and transported it back to the night shadow. As they moved through the docking tube, the human vessel's emergency lights flickered and died, plunging it into darkness. In the medical bay, Dr. Sunmai examined the pod and its occupant with growing concern. "The stasis field is unstable," she reported to Tahoe. "The pod was damaged during whatever incident disabled the transport. We need to bring her out of stasis soon." Tahoe stared at the small figure in the pod. The child, Emma, had dark hair and peaceful features, so small, so vulnerable, so completely unaware that her fate now rested in the hands of people who had come to steal, not to save. "How soon can we reach a neutral station?" he asked his navigator. 3 days at best speed, Captain." Tahoe looked back at the child. "Prepare to bring her out of stasis," he told Sunmai. "It seems we have a guest for the next 3 days." Little did he know that those 3 days would stretch much longer, and that the small human child now aboard his vessel would change everything for the crew of the Night Shadow. The medical bay of the Night Shadow hummed with the soft beeping of monitors. Dr. Sunmai bent over the stasis pod, her dark eyes narrowed in concentration as she checked the readings for the 5th time in the past hour. The child inside remained peaceful, unaware of the heated debate taking place over her fate. Captain Tahoe stood with his arms crossed, watching the doctor work. He had faced space storms, rival pirates, and military patrols, but the small human in the pod made him more uneasy than any of them. "The stasis field is breaking down faster than I thought," Sunmai said without looking up. "We need to make a decision soon." Security Officer Jai-ho, a tall man with a permanently stern expression, shook his head. "This is not our problem, Captain. We're raiders, not rescuers." "I'm well aware of what we are," Tahoe replied, his voice sharp. Jai-ho stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then you know bringing a human child aboard is asking for trouble. We should put the pod back on the transport and leave an anonymous distress signal. Someone will find it." "How long would that take?" Tahoe asked Sunmai, the doctor's hand still on her instruments. "Too long. The pod's power cells are failing. 24 hours at most before complete system failure." "And then?" Tahoe asked, though he already knew the answer. "And then the child dies," Sunmai said simply. The small medical bay fell silent except for the steady beep of the monitoring equipment. Tahoe walked to the pod and looked down at the sleeping child. Emma, according to the pod's records. Just a name and a destination in the vast emptiness of space. Du Yun entered the medical bay, his usual confident stride now hesitant. "Captain, we've completed our sweep of the transport ship's database. The child was the only passenger. She was being transported from Earth to Colony Harmony for adoption." "No family?" Tahoe asked. "None listed, just a case number and transfer orders." Jai-ho saw his opening. "All the more reason to alert authorities and leave. No one will miss her specifically. It's tragic, but not our concern." Sun Mai slammed her hand on the nearby table. She's a child, Jai-ho, not cargo to be abandoned. Doctor, Jai-ho replied coldly, may I remind you that we are the Star Raiders. We take things. We don't rescue people, especially not humans. Tai-ho remained silent, his mind racing through options. The Star Raiders had a long and complicated history with humans. Never outright war, but numerous confrontations over territory and resources. Humans viewed them as criminals. The Star Raiders saw humans as expansionist invaders. And yet, looking at the child in the pod, Tai-ho saw neither enemy nor adversary, just a small, vulnerable being caught in circumstances beyond her control. What would it take to safely bring her out of stasis? He asked Sunme. The doctor blinked in surprise. We'd need to slowly warm the pod, monitor her vital signs, and have medical supplies ready. Human children are fragile, but I've studied enough comparative biology to manage the basics. Captain, you can't be serious, Jai-ho protested. If we take responsibility for this child, what then? We can't exactly continue our normal operations with a human youngling aboard. 3 days to the nearest neutral station, Tai-ho reminded him. 3 days, then we hand her over to proper authorities. Anonymous drop. That's all. Engineer Han-gil entered the medical bay, wiping his hands on a rag. Captain, I've checked the pod systems. I can keep it running another 12 hours, maybe 15. After that, he shrugged. Tai-ho nodded slowly. Then we don't have much choice. Prepare to bring her out of stasis. Jai-ho stepped forward. Captain, I must formally object. This puts our ship and crew at risk, if we're caught with a human child. Your objection is noted. Tai-ho cut him off, his voice hard as steel. Now help the doctor prepare, or return to your station. After a tense moment, Jai-ho nodded stiffly and moved to assist Sunme. The process of bringing Emma out of stasis took 2 hours. The crew gathered in the medical bay, watching with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension as Sunme carefully monitored the pod systems while Han-gil adjusted the temperature controls. Heart rate increasing. Sunme reported. Brain activity normalizing. She's coming out of it. The pod's cover slid open with a soft hiss. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the child's eyelids fluttered and opened, revealing deep brown eyes that blinked in confusion at the circle of unfamiliar faces above her. No one spoke. The hardened pirates of the Night Shadow, who had faced down military vessels without flinching, now stood frozen, unsure how to react to the small human looking up at them. Emma sat up slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. She looked around the medical bay, taking in the strange equipment and stranger people. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but clear. Where am I? Where's Miss Chen? Sunme stepped forward, her normally brisk manner softening. Hello, Emma. I'm Dr. Sunme. You're on our ship, the Night Shadow. We found you on a damaged transport. The child's eyes widened. The ship was shaking. Miss Chen put me in the special bed. She said I'd sleep until we reached my new home. Tai-ho saw Sunme hesitate. Miss Chen isn't here, the doctor said gently. We only found you. Emma looked around again, as if expecting to see her caretaker appear from behind the medical equipment. When no one appeared, her lower lip trembled slightly, but no tears came. Am I going to my new family now? She asked. Tai-ho stepped forward. We're taking you to a safe place. From there, yes, you'll go to your new family. The child studied him with surprising intensity. Are you pirates? Miss Chen told me stories about pirates in space. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Tai-ho crouched down to eye level with Emma. We're transporters. We're helping you get where you need to go. Emma nodded solemnly, accepting this explanation with the simple trust of childhood. I'm hungry, she announced. This ordinary statement broke the tension. Sunme immediately began checking what food they had that would be suitable for a human child. Han Gil offered to adjust the environmental controls to human comfort levels. Even Jeho muttered that he would secure a sleeping area. As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Taeho remained, watching the child who now sat swinging her legs at the edge of the examination table, looking around the medical bay with undisguised curiosity. 3 days, he reminded himself quietly. Just 3 days, then back to normal. But as Emma turned to him with a small, brave smile, Taeho had the unsettling feeling that nothing about this situation would be simple or temporary. "Captain," she said, the title sounding strange in her childish voice, "your ship is very nice." Despite himself, Taeho felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. "Thank you," he replied, realizing this was probably the first time anyone had ever complimented the feared pirate vessel Night Shadow. 3 days suddenly seemed both too long and not long enough. The Night Shadow continued its journey toward the neutral station, but the small human now aboard had already begun to change the ship in unexpected ways. Emma adapted to life on the pirate vessel with surprising ease. By the second day, she was walking confidently through the corridors, greeting crew members by name. The pirates, initially awkward and uncertain around her, found themselves responding to her open curiosity and fearless questions. "Why is your skin blue?" she asked Boram, the navigation officer. "My people come from a world with a blue sun," he explained, surprised to find himself smiling at the child. "It's pretty," Emma decided, before skipping away to explore more of the ship. In the medical bay, Dr. Sunbai had transformed her organized workspace into a research center focused on human childcare. She scanned through the ship's database, pulling every reference to human development and nutritional needs. "Their digestive systems are remarkably similar to ours," she muttered, making notes. "But they require more calcium and iron, and regular sleep cycles are essential." When Emma complained of being bored, Engineer Han Gil found himself in an unexpected role. In his workshop, surrounded by tools and spare parts, he looked at the child with uncertainty. "What do human children do for entertainment?" he asked. Emma shrugged. "Miss Chen read me stories, and I had toys on Earth." Han Gil considered this, then picked up some colorful wire and small, harmless components. Within an hour, he had created a simple toy, a collection of metal rings that could be arranged in different patterns. "It's beautiful," Emma exclaimed, her eyes wide with delight, as she took the makeshift toy. Han Gil felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest at her reaction. That night, Emma refused to sleep in the medical bay. "It's too quiet," she complained, "and the lights are too bright." Lieutenant Du Yun, who had been avoiding the child since bringing her aboard, found himself volunteered by Sunmi to help solve this problem. "You have quarters near mine," the doctor pointed out. "Set up a sleeping area for her there." Du Yun, who had faced down armed security forces without flinching, looked terrified at this assignment. But that evening, he awkwardly prepared a small bed in the corner of his quarters. "Is this acceptable?" he asked as Emma inspected his work. The child bounced on the makeshift bed and nodded. "But I need a story before sleep. Miss Chen always told me stories." Du Yun glanced desperately around his Spartan quarters, as if hoping a children's book might materialize. "I don't have any stories for children. Tell me about being a pirate," Emma suggested, settling under the blanket. "We're not." Du Yun began automatically, then sighed. "What kind of story would you like?" "A space battle," Emma said, eyes shining. Du Yun thought for a moment, then began to tell a heavily modified version of a recent encounter with a rival ship. He carefully removed all mentions of weapons fire, injuries, and the cargo they had stolen, transforming the story into an exciting chase through an asteroid field. Emma listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that forced Du Yun to become increasingly creative with his tale. By the time she fell asleep, he had somehow turned a brutal pirate skirmish into a heroic adventure where the Night Shadow saved the day. Looking down at the sleeping child, Du Yun felt strangely confused. In just 2 days, This small human had completely disrupted the ship's routine, yet no one seemed to mind. Meanwhile, Captain Tahoe maintained his distance. He directed the ship's operations from the bridge, deliberately avoiding the areas where Emma spent most of her time. 3 days, he reminded himself. Just 3 days. But when they approached the neutral station on the 3rd day, Security Officer Jai-Ho brought troubling news. "There's a problem, Captain. The station is currently hosting representatives from the Human Alliance. If we dock there with a human child..." Tai-Ho frowned. "They would ask questions we don't want to answer." "Precisely. And the record of the transport ship has likely been reported by now." Tai-Ho studied the star chart. "The next neutral station is 4 days away. Can we risk it?" Jai-Ho hesitated, then said what neither had expected. "The child seems comfortable here. Perhaps a few more days won't matter." Tai-Ho raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Plot a course for Station Kepler. We'll try there." 4 days became 7 as they discovered Station Kepler was dealing with a viral outbreak. 7 became 10 when political tensions flared at their next potential drop point. During this time, Emma became a fixture on the Night Shadow. Han-Gil created more toys, each more elaborate than the last. Sun Mai established a routine of meals and rest periods. Du Yun's bedtime stories became legendary among the crew, with off-duty pirates sometimes gathering to listen to his increasingly creative tales. Captain Tahoe still kept his distance, eating in his quarters and limiting his interaction with the child. But he couldn't help noticing the changes in his crew. The normally stern Jai-Ho had taught Emma a simplified version of a strategic board game. Bo Ran had shown her how to identify different star patterns on the navigation display. Tai-Ho was in his quarters reviewing reports when his door slid open without the customary request for entry. He looked up, startled, to find Emma standing there, holding a piece of flat metal. "Dr. Sunmei said you were working," she said, "but I made you something." Before Tai-Ho could respond, she crossed the room and placed the metal sheet on his desk. On it was a drawing made with colored marker pens, clearly showing the night shadow among stars. Stick figures stood on what appeared to be the bridge, one taller than the others with Captain Ta written beneath it in careful letters. "Han-Gil gave me special pens that work on metal," Emma explained proudly. "Do you like it?" Tai-Ho stared at the drawing. In his 15 years as a pirate, he had accumulated treasures from across the galaxy. None had been given freely, and none had been created specifically for him. He struggled to find words. "It's very good." Emma beamed. "We're going through the asteroid field now. Bo Ram showed me on the big map. He said you're the best captain for asteroid fields." Tai-Ho felt something shift inside him, like a locked door opening slightly. "Would you like to see the bridge during the passage?" he heard himself ask. Emma's eyes widened. "Can I really?" Minutes later, Emma stood on the bridge of the Night Shadow, watching with wonder as the ship navigated between massive rocks floating in space. The crew, initially surprised by her presence, quickly adjusted. Bo Ram explained the navigation system. Ji-Ho let her examine his security monitors. Tai-Ho, watching from his captain's chair, realized with sudden clarity that the 3 days he had promised himself had long passed. Somehow, without anyone quite deciding it, Emma had become part of the crew. That night, after Emma had gone to sleep, Tai-Ho called his officers to the ship's conference room. "We need to find a permanent solution," he said. "We can't keep postponing the inevitable." But as his officers began discussing options, Tai-Ho noticed that none involved immediately handing Emma over to the authorities. Instead, they talked of finding the right place, the right people, making sure she would be properly cared for. The feared pirates of the Night Shadow, it seemed, had become unlikely guardians, and Tai-Ho, despite his best efforts, found he didn't mind at all. 3 cycles had passed since Emma joined the crew of the Night Shadow. Those 3 days that Captain Tai-Ho had initially planned had stretched into weeks, then months. The fierce pirate vessel no longer prowled shipping lanes looking for easy targets. Instead, they took legitimate transport contracts, moving cargo between stations while searching for the perfect place for Emma. The child was now 7 years old, having celebrated her birthday aboard the Night Shadow with a cake that Dr. Sunmai had spent days researching how to make. She had grown 2 inches taller and had learned to read in 3 languages thanks to Lieutenant Du-Yun's patient teaching. Her collection of toys made by Engineer Han Gil filled a special chest in her quarters that had once been a storage room, but were now decorated with drawings and small treasures collected from their travels. "Captain, we're approaching the Procyon Nebula," Bo-Ram reported from the navigation station. The swirling gases of the nebula filled the main view screen, beautiful purples and blues mixing like paint and water. Tai-Ho nodded. "Maintain course. The trading post is just beyond the nebula's edge." Emma sat in a small chair next to Sunmi's station, working on a lesson about star formations. She looked up at the view screen and gasped. "It's like an ocean in the sky," she exclaimed. Tai-Ho found himself smiling. "Similar, yes. The gases move like currents." The bridge crew had grown accustomed to Emma's presence. The sight of a small human child on the bridge of a former pirate vessel no longer seemed strange to any of them. She had become as much a part of the Night Shadow as any crew member. The ship's reputation had changed as well. Once feared as ruthless raiders, the crew of the Night Shadow was now known as mysterious merchants who somehow always had a young human in tow. Some stations initially refused them docking permissions because of their history, but over time, their new identity as legitimate transporters had begun to stick. "Captain," Jai-Ho called suddenly from the security station, his voice sharp. "Multiple ships approaching from behind the nebula. Weapons active." Tai-Ho straightened in his chair. "Identification. 3 vessels. Raider class." Jai-Ho's fingers moved rapidly over his console. "Their transponders are masked, but the configuration matches the blood stars." A cold weight settled in Tai-Ho's stomach. The blood stars were notorious even among pirates. Ruthless, cruel, and known for trading in living cargo as well as goods. "Battle stations," Tai-Ho ordered. "Shields up. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The bridge erupted into activity. Emma looked around, her eyes wide. "What's happening?" she asked Sunme. The doctor placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "Nothing to worry about. Just some ships that want to talk to us." But Tai-Ho knew it was far more serious than that. The blood stars wouldn't have come with 3 ships just to talk, and there was only one reason they would target the Night Shadow specifically. "They know about Emma," he said quietly to Jai-Ho. The security officer nodded grimly. "Almost certainly. In the underground markets, a human child would be valuable." The main communication system crackled to life before Tai-Ho could respond. A harsh voice filled the bridge. "Night Shadow, this is Captain Minki of the Blood Stars. Your reputation has suffered lately, old friends. Plain merchant, hauling cargo like common workers." There was a pause. "But we hear you have something special aboard. Something worth a great deal to the right buyers." Emma looked confused, but Sun Mike quickly guided her away from the bridge. Tai-Ho waited until they were gone before responding. "This is Captain Tai-Ho. We have nothing of interest to you, Min-Ki. Move on." A cold laugh answered him. "Don't insult me, Tai-Ho. We know about the human child. Hand her over, and we'll let your crew live. The Night Shadow can continue its pitiful existence as a cargo hauler." Tai-Ho felt a rage building inside him, hot and fierce. In all his years as a pirate, he had never felt such protective fury. His hand tightened on the arm of his captain's chair. "Lieutenant Du-Yun," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "arm all weapons. Bo-Ram, plot us a course through the densest part of the nebula." "Captain." Jai-Ho looked surprised. "We're outgunned 3-1. "I'm aware." Tai-Ho stood, his decision made. "All hands, this is the captain. Protect the human child at all costs. Anyone who boards this vessel does not leave alive. He was surprised by the fierceness of his own words, but more surprised by the determined nods from his crew. They felt it too, this strange, powerful need to protect Emma. "Let's show the Blood Stars why the Night Shadow was once feared across 3 sectors," Taiho said. The ship plunged into the nebula, gases swirling around the hull. The Blood Stars followed, their larger ships less maneuverable in the thick cosmic clouds. Bo-Ram guided the Night Shadow with skill born of years of experience, using the nebula to mask their position. "They're splitting up," Jaiho reported, "trying to surround us." "Good," said Taiho. "That's what I was hoping for. Target the lid ship. Full power to forward weapons." The Night Shadow burst from a dense cloud directly behind the Lee Blood Star vessel. Before they could react, the Night Shadow's weapons hit their engines, disabling their propulsion systems in one devastating strike. "One down," Taiho said grimly. The battle that followed was unlike anything the crew had experienced. In the past, the Night Shadow would have retreated from such unfavorable odds, slipping away to fight another day. But now, with Emma's safety at stake, they fought with an intensity that shocked even themselves. Du Yun directed weapons fire with deadly precision. Bo-Ram executed maneuvers that strained the ship's structural integrity. Jiho coordinated their defenses, shifting shield power to meet each new attack. When one of the Blood Star ships managed to close distance and attempt boarding, the Night Shadow's crew met them with fierce resistance. Every pirate who stepped aboard found themselves facing not just opponents, but protectors fighting for someone they cared about. In the medical bay, Sunmai had sealed the doors with Emma inside, keeping her distracted with stories while monitoring the battle through her console. "Are we going to be okay?" Emma asked, sensing the tension despite Sunmai's calm voice. "Of course," Sunmai assured her. "Captain Taiho won't let anything happen to you." And he didn't. After 20 minutes of intense fighting, the remaining Blood Star vessel limped away, trailing debris. The Night Shadow had suffered damage as well. Hull breaches on 2 decks, weapon systems strained to their limits, and several crew members injured. But they had won. Emma was safe. Taiho stood in the middle of the damaged bridge, surveying his exhausted crew. They had fought like warriors protecting their home, not pirates defending stolen goods. "Status report," he ordered, his voice hoarse from shouting commands. "Engines at 60%, Bo-Ram reported. "We can still travel, but not at top speed." "Weapon systems overheated but functional," added Du Yun. 3 injured crew members, Jaiho said. "Sunmai is treating them now. No casualties." Taiho nodded slowly. "Then we've done well today." The doors to the bridge slid open, and Emma rushed in, followed by a protesting Sunmai. The child ran straight to Taiho and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Sunmai said you kept us safe from bad people," she said, her voice muffled against his uniform. Taiho hesitated only a moment before placing his hand on her head. "Yes," he said simply, "and we always will." Looking around at his crew, Taiho saw the same resolution in their eyes. The hunters had indeed become the hunted, but in the process, they had found something worth protecting, something worth changing for. The observation deck of Space Station Harmony offered a spectacular view of the swirling blue planet below. Captain Taiho stood alone, his back straight, his face unreadable as he watched ships coming and going from the visiport. His dark uniform, normally adorned with the insignia of the Star Raiders, was unmarked today. He looked like any other merchant captain taking a moment of quiet before returning to his vessel. But Taiho was not just any captain, and today was not just any day. "The human diplomat has arrived," Jaiho said, appearing silently beside him. "She's waiting in the conference room." Taiho nodded. "And Emma, with Sun Mai and Du Yun, getting ready. She's excited about her new dress." A small smile touched Taiho's lips. For a child who had spent almost a year aboard a pirate ship, Emma had maintained a surprisingly normal interest in things like pretty clothes and colorful toys. Perhaps children were adaptable, no matter what their circumstances. The decision to contact human authorities had not been easy. After the battle with the Blood Stars, the crew of the Night Shadow had realized that Emma would never be truly safe with them. There would always be enemies, always be danger. She deserved a normal life, with a family, with other children, with a future that didn't include running from sector police. The vote had been unanimous, though no one had been happy about it. "It's time," Jai-Ho said softly. Tai-Ho turned away from the view of the planet. "Then let's not keep them waiting." The conference room was small but elegant, with a polished table and comfortable chairs. A human woman in formal diplomatic attire stood as they entered. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Tai-Ho. His reputation as a pirate captain was well known, even if he wasn't wearing his usual insignia. "Captain Tai-Ho," she said, regaining her composure. "I am diplomat Junni. Thank you for reaching out through official channels." Tai-Ho nodded stiffly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet without bringing security forces. Your message was intriguing. You mentioned a human child." The door slid open again, and Sunmai entered with Emma. The child wore a simple blue dress that Hangil had traded valuable parts to obtain from a merchant. Her dark hair was neatly brushed, and she looked both excited and nervous. Diplomat Junhee's professional mask slipped. "Oh," she said softly. "Hello there." Emma looked up at Sunmai, who nodded encouragingly. "Hello," she said. "I'm Emma." "Emma has been with us for 11 months, Tai-Ho said. "We found her on a damaged transport vessel, the only survivor. The ship's records indicated she was being sent to Colony Harmony for adoption." Junhee stared in disbelief. "You've had a human child aboard a pirate vessel for almost a year." "The Night Shadow has not engaged in piracy during that time," Tai-Ho said firmly. "We have been operating as legitimate transporters while searching for a suitable arrangement for Emma." Do-Yun stepped forward, holding a data tablet. "We have maintained detailed records of Emma's care," he said, handing the tablet to the diplomat. "Her diet, educational progress, sleep patterns, and medical information. Dr. Sunmai has ensured her health and development meet human standards." Junhee scrolled through the information, her expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. "This is remarkably thorough. You've been teaching her advanced mathematics and 3 languages. She's very smart," Do-Yun said, a hint of pride in his voice. Emma moved to stand beside Tai-Ho, taking his hand without hesitation. The gesture, so simple yet so trusting, made the captain's throat tighten unexpectedly. "We're here because Emma deserves a real home," Tai-Ho said. "A family, safety, things we cannot provide while continuing our way of life." "I understand," Junhee said, her voice softening as she watched the interaction between the pirate captain and the human child. "I can arrange for her transfer to Colony Harmony's family placement services." "They're excellent." "We have conditions," Tai-Ho interrupted. The diplomat raised an eyebrow. "Conditions. Emma must be placed with a suitable family. Not an institution, not a temporary arrangement. A real family who will care for her properly. That's standard practice. She must continue her education at the level she has already achieved." Tai-Ho continued. "No starting over because of her unusual circumstances." Junhee nodded slowly. "I'm sure that can be arranged." And Tai-Ho hesitated, looking down at Emma. "She must know that we did not abandon her. That we care for her." The conference room fell silent. Junhee looked from the pirate captain to the small human child, then to the other crew members standing protectively nearby. Whatever she had expected from this meeting, it clearly wasn't this. "These pirates have been your family, haven't they?" she asked Emma gently. Emma nodded. "Captain Tai-Ho keeps everyone safe. Dr. Sunmai makes sure I eat healthy foods. Lieutenant Do-Yun teaches me about stars and math. Engineer Hangil makes the best toys in the whole galaxy." "I see." Junhee smiled, then turned back to Tai-Ho. "I believe we can accommodate your conditions, Captain, and perhaps we can discuss something else as well, a formal agreement between your people and the Human Alliance. A peace treaty of sorts. Tai-Ho looked surprised. What kind of treaty? One that recognizes the protection you've provided to a human child and establishes terms for ongoing peaceful relations. The next few hours were filled with discussions, arrangements, and promises. By the end, a basic agreement had been formed. Emma would go to a carefully selected family on Colony Harmony. The Night Shadow and its crew would receive pardons for past activities and recognition as legitimate transporters. And a framework for a historic peace treaty between the Star Raiders and the Human Alliance would begin development. When it was time to say goodbye, the crew of the Night Shadow gathered in the docking bay. Han Gil presented Emma with one final toy, a miniature replica of the Night Shadow that lit up when squeezed. Sun Mai had prepared a detailed health record and care instructions for her new family. Du Yun had created a star chart showing all the places they had traveled together. Tai-Ho knelt to Emma's level. "You're going to have a good life," he said quietly. "A normal life, with a family who will love you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "But you're my family too." "Yes," Tai-Ho said, no longer denying what they all knew to be true. "And we always will be. That's why we need to let you go." "Will I see you again?" she asked. Tai-Ho glanced at Diplomat Chun-Hee, who gave a small nod. "Yes," he promised. "We'll come visit when we can." And they did. Over the years that followed, on distant outposts and space stations, stories spread of the former pirate vessel that would appear without warning, carrying exotic gifts for a human girl before vanishing back into the stars. Emma grew into a confident young woman, excelling in her studies and eventually following Diplomat Chun-Hee into the diplomatic service. When a formal peace treaty between humans and the Star Raiders was finally signed 15 years later, it was Ambassador Emma who led the negotiations, drawing on her unique understanding of both worlds. "How did you manage to bring them to the table after all these years?" a colleague asked her after the historic signing. Emma smiled, her hand touching a small pendant she always wore, a miniature starship that still lit up when squeezed. "I simply reminded them." She said, "That family always finds a way home." The end.